Hello there, nerds. Welcome back to the Waifus. I am Sefhi, your favorite gambling addict, and today I want to talk a little bit about team compositions in STARSEED and the best teams that you can be building in order to progress in Operation. For those of you who don't know, in Operation you will encounter stages that require up to 3 teams, which for a lot of people, building 3 teams it's a pain in the ass early on because the lack of resources and how hard it is to get some of those. Mostly the resources to level up your characters and even to get good gear. So as you can see, I'm pushing on 600 versus 1.7 million, 684 versus 1.4 million, etc. So I want to go element by element into what I believe are the best combinations and the ones that I'm personally using to push Operation as far as possible. Before we start, leave a like, subscribe, help me grow the channel, and you have right now on top of me a code to claim some free resources that if you go into settings, account, and redeem coupon, you'll be able to get all of them. That said, let's get started, and I'm gonna move myself to the top so you guys can see better, and I'm gonna be going into the simulation and go element by element. So I'm gonna put myself here so you guys can see all the units. I'm not gonna be putting any enemies or anything, but just going color by color into what I believe is the best combinations. It's really important to use characters of the same core because the core synergy in this game is really big. As you can see, if you use 5 characters of the same core, you're getting 30% HP and attack. And if you're putting also dark and light units, you're getting EP charge speed or reducing the enemy EP charge speed. So I would recommend putting at least 4 characters of the same element of each team, unless you are a new player and are lacking characters, which is completely fine. Also important, but 20% additional damage is really good, so make sure that your teams, you are switching them around based on what your enemies are doing. All that said, let's start with actually the team recommendations, and we can start with red and go one by one, why not? Now, before we also talk about like each color, you also have to remember that your light and dark characters will be flex characters that you're gonna be using on different teams. So not only your Mea, but Eradika and Raihu are characters that are flex. You'll be putting them on different teams depending what you're doing and what you need. In my case, I will talk about how personally I am distributing them myself. So let's start with the red team. The red team right now has one of the strongest DPSs for both PvE and PvP, which is Rachel. She's a really good assassin. The most important thing about Rachel that you have to remember is that depending if you're using a Wake or Blossom, she will target highest attack or other enemies. So you want to switch between a Wake and Blossom depending if you want her to target, a tank or the rangers at the back. That's really important to remember. If you forget, it's completely fine since the game isn't idle to begin with, and a lot of these stages you just have to wait until you're stronger rather than meddling around. That said, Rachel is really good. I'm personally pairing her with both Yuri as a support and ID as a ranger character for some extra damage. The problem that Red has right now is that they lack tanks. There is not a single good tank in this element. In fact, you are better off using a properly invested Yuna rather than Ambrosia as a tank. That's what I do personally. My Ambrosia is usually my front line. Now, I usually also put in this team myself Mea as the other front line for 2 reasons, right? Mea will be using her ultimate that will fear everyone. And when you are feeding everyone, you have enough time to also be casting your ultimate with Yuri and with your Rachel to start killing off the enemies. So personally, I have a team where I'm just waiting until my Rachel can ult. What I've been doing recently as well is instead of ID, I'm putting Eradika. Now, the thing to remember about Eradika, this is super important, is that her ultimate, please, for the love of God, never use Blossom for PvE. The Blossom skill is the one that will banish enemies constantly. When you are banishing enemies, if my Rachel, for example, is doing her ultimate and I banish an enemy, she's fucked. Her ultimate is gone, right? For Rachel. So make sure to remember that for Eradika specifically, she needs to be on a wake for PvE. That's like the only thing to remember. And then your Rachel, it depends on what enemies you want to target, right? So this is the team that I'm personally using for red. Now, you could also be removing Mea and putting another tank. Let's say if it's your Itus, let's say it's like a proper red tank if you have like an invested Ambrosia, even though I would not recommend it. But this is a great team for red to actually push content. Now, the other 2 DPSs for red, if you don't have Rachel, are going to be ID and Ino. ID is a decent DPS. She was the first banner when the game came out. I would say that nowadays by standard she's more of a sub DPS rather than just your main damage dealer. And the problem with Ino is that Ino is an amazing character for bosses for this defense down on her Blossom. But when it comes to normal content, she is not that great, and I would not recommend putting her as a main damage dealer outside of bosses, right? She is a debuffer rather than a main DPS. That said, let's move into the blue team. Blue team has similar issues where it's really good characters that cannot be put together just because it's 5 blue units, right? The main DPSs for this element are going to be Kaito and Patricia. Patricia and Kaito cannot be together. Now, I usually put them together because I don't care about pushing as much. I'm a casual player, but you have to remember that Patricia, if she is paired with any attacker character, any melee unit, she will lose a lot of damage. So if I go to her passive right here, and I go to the bottom, as you can see, grants the following effects to the Proxian if there are no attackers on the team. Attack increased by 120%. Which is a really big increase. So most people will put Patricia with Erika on the backline as a sub DPS, and also she increases damage to people that have a dot on them. So they pair together really, really well. The support that most people are going to be using for the blue team, of course, is going to be Halona, an amazing support and healer, and the best tank in the game is Itus, so no reason to not use her. Now, in my case, and again, you should not be doing this, but I like both of them, so I have Kaito with my Patricia on my team. I have Halona in front, and I have a Snowbrill as my second tank. A Snowbrill is a tank that is used on PvE and also on bosses thanks to the damage immunity and the damage reduction. So I will say this is a really good blue team. The only thing to remember, if you don't have, really strong Patricias and Kaito, like is my case because I've invested in them and pulled a lot, I will say that you should be running Erika with Patricia, and then what you could be doing instead is putting Kaito with one of the light characters, like for example Eradika or someone else as a filler, right? That is a really, really good blue team. Now that's the main team for blue. You also have some other characters that are considered decent. For example, Daria can be used on filler teams. Anyone else in blue, I would personally not recommend investing in since it doesn't make much sense. Now let's move into the last team, and that's going to be, of course, green. Green has a few characters that are pretty strong, and that's going to be, of course, Freya and Sia. Now, Freya and Sia are the best combo for pushing campaign because they were made to be played together. So for those of you who don't know, your Freya, her passive makes it so everyone in your team cannot do crit damage. So no one on your team can crit. A lot of the characters are built around critting. So this is really bad. But the good thing is that Sia on her ultimate, the Blossom version, the Awake version also makes it so she cannot crit. So they are literally a pair made in heaven. So I usually have my green team just waiting for Freya to burst, and she will clear absolutely the whole map. I put as my frontline my Sia, and I also put Melissa as my other frontline. So I have my DPS, my sub DPS also as a tank, and my frontline here. I use Shell as a support, which is a really good character, and then you can put a filler unit. Be that a Reihu, be that another DPS, maybe you have another frontline like a Yuna in here, whatever you want. The other green characters that are noteworthy, if you wish to, are Aleia and Angelica together. I don't like this combo, but they are made to be working together. If they're on the same team, they buff each other. I think this is a really bad investment unless they are your waifus. In that case, go for that, but it's not the good team, right? I just don't like them at all. Now, I've mentioned both Eradika and Reihu, but I haven't mentioned Mea. I want to talk about Mea, but let me show you my teams that I'm using right now so you can see how I use my Mea. This is the teams that I've been using basically since the game came out, as the characters come out, of course, right? So my first team is a team where I just stall for time so my Freya can burst and kill everything. That's the first team. I have Shell to buff and heal, I have my Melissa and my Sia as tanks, and then just an Iron as a filler because there is nothing else to put in there, just so she can tank some damage while my Freya prepares her ultimate. My second team is the blue team that I was talking about earlier. There is a thing that I changed here. If my Itus can tank everything, I would remove her and I would put instead Halona as a buffer. It depends on the level and what I'm doing. Like I said earlier, you should not be putting both Patricia and Kaito together. You can't put them together, and that's what I've been doing. But Patricia will lose a lot of damage. So my main DPS here is my Kaito. Right? If you have a really strong Kaito, this makes sense. If your Kaito is not strong enough, this is a waste of damage for your Patricia. So Weak Kaito, remove Kaito, put Erika. Strong Kaito, you can pair her with your Patricia as a sub DPS, and also for the Frozen effect, since this is a really good Frozen team, if you're putting a Snow Pearl here as well for her ultimate. And then lastly, I have a red team that I'm using right here. As you can see, I'm having my Yuna as a frontline with my Mea. I'm using Mea for her fear. For those of you who don't know, her ultimate will also put a fear on the enemies, which will make them run away for a second or two, which is really good to make time for your main DPS to actually use her ultimate, which in my case, it's Rachel. I have Jurisia, buffing both Eradika and Rachel, and just Yuna as a front line to tank and soak some damage. Sadly, there is no good tank for red, and Ambrosia is not good, so those are the three teams that I'm personally using right now, which once again, I'm not going to be claiming they are the best teams out there, but these are the ones that I've been using and have helped me push all the way to where I'm right now, which on the first server for global, server 20,000, I am on the place 15. In contrast to the biggest wells, of course, I am still pretty far away, but overall they are pretty good teams that have helped me get right here. That said, that's gonna be it for this video. Like I said earlier, there is a code in the comments, don't forget to claim it, and any questions you guys might have, leave it also down below and I will try to answer. That said, good luck with your pool dinner rates, thank you for watching, and see you in the next one.
役立たずは楽園から追放するのみ。ブランとノワールのショータイムです。天地万物を切るとはこういうことだ。